Have you ever stood at the brink of destiny, uncertain, yet knowing your choice could save an entire nation? Have you ever wondered why you were born in a specific place, time, and circumstance? What if your silence could be the loudest betrayal? What if your voice, no matter how trembling, was the trumpet of salvation? This is the story of a young Jewish girl, orphaned and hidden in exile, who rose from obscurity to become queen of the most powerful empire of her time. A woman who stood alone between genocide and deliverance, risking her life not for a crown, but for her people. Her name is Esther, and this is her story. In the grand palace of Shushan, amidst golden goblets and flowing wine, King Xerxes, Ahasuerus, ruled over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. It was the third year of his reign, and he hosted a massive feast lasting 180 days to display his opulence and strength. On the seventh day, drunk with pride and wine, he commanded his wife, Queen Vashti, to appear before him wearing her royal crown, to display her beauty before his drunken guests. But Vashti, bold and unapologetic, refused. In a world where women had no voice, Vashti roared. For that act of defiance, she was banished, ushering in a vacancy that would set the stage for Esther's rise. The lesson here is that pride and power are fragile when challenged by principle. With Vashti gone, royal advisors proposed a nationwide beauty search. Young virgins from every province were to be brought to the palace, prepared for a year with oils and perfumes, and then presented to the king. Among them was Hadassah, also called Esther, a Jewish orphan raised by her older cousin Mordecai. She was taken from obscurity, her true heritage hidden, and brought to the king's harem. Esther's name means star, but Hadassah means myrtle, a plant that remains fragrant even when crushed, an apt symbol for her trials to come. Despite not flaunting herself like the others, Esther found favor with Haggai, the custodian of the women. She was given the best quarters, maids, and treatment. After 12 months, her turn came to meet the king. Unlike others, she asked for nothing but what Haggai suggested. The king was captivated, not by seduction, but by the quiet strength and grace within her. He crowned her queen of Persia. She never revealed she was Jewish, an identity that, if exposed, might have barred her from the crown. Mordecai, stationed at the king's gate, uncovered a plot by two eunuchs to assassinate the king. He informed Esther, who told Xerxes in Mordecai's name. The conspirators were executed, and the deed recorded in the royal chronicles, though Mordecai was not rewarded. This seemingly minor detail would become pivotal later. The king elevated Haman the Agagite, descendant of King Agag, an ancient enemy of the Jews, to second in command. All were commanded to bow to him, but Mordecai refused, citing his loyalty to God. Haman, enraged, sought not only Mordecai's death, but plotted genocide against all Jews in the empire. Here is an historical insight. Haman's lineage links back to the Amalekites, ancient enemies of Israel. This was not just personal, it was spiritual warfare resurfacing through generations. Haman cast lots to choose a date to annihilate the Jews, the 13th day of Adar. With the king's signet ring, he issued a royal decree for the extermination of all Jews, young and old, men and women. The city of Susa was in confusion. Mordecai mourned in sackcloth and ashes. Mordecai sent word to Esther, urging her to plead with the king, but she had not been summoned in 30 days. Appearing before him uninvited meant death, unless the king extended his golden scepter. Do not think that because you're in the king's house you alone will escape, Mordecai warned. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Esther asked all Jews to fast for 3 days. If I perish, she declared. On the third day, Esther dressed in her royal robes and stood in the inner court. The king saw her and extended his scepter. She touched it and was spared. He asked what she desired. She invited him and Haman to a banquet. At the banquet, the king again asked what she desired. Esther only requested another banquet. With Haman present again, Haman left elated, but when he saw Mordecai still refusing to bow, he was enraged. He built a 75-foot gallows to hang him. That night, the king couldn't sleep. He ordered the royal chronicles read to him. The story of Mordecai saving his life was read, but no reward had been given. At that moment, Haman entered, intending to request Mordecai's execution. The king asked, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Thinking it was for himself, Haman suggested a royal parade. The king ordered Haman to honor Mordecai publicly. Haman obeyed, humiliated. At the second banquet, Esther finally revealed her petition. "If I have found favor, spare my people, for we are to be destroyed." The king, shocked, asked who was responsible. "This vile Haman," she cried. The king stormed out in rage. Haman, begging Esther for mercy, fell on her couch just as the king returned. Mistaking it for assault, Xerxes ordered Haman impaled on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. Haman was gone, but the decree still stood. Persian law was irreversible. Esther again risked her life, unsummoned, and the king granted her request. A new decree was issued, allowing the Jews to defend themselves on the 13th of Adar. Mordecai was promoted, given Haman's position and estate. Esther made him guardian over it. Though Haman was dead, his evil still lived in the law. In the Persian Empire, royal decrees were irreversible, even by the king himself. This meant the original edict, authorizing the annihilation of all Jews on the 13th day of Adar, still stood. Esther, knowing the urgency, summoned her courage once more and approached the king uninvited. A second time, knowing full well the risk. Once again, the golden scepter extended toward her, but this time, her petition was different. It was not just for her life, but for the lives of thousands who had no voice in the court. She pleaded, "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in your sight, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman." The king acknowledged her pain, but he explained the dilemma. What has been written in the king's name and sealed with his ring cannot be revoked. What followed next was a stroke of providential strategy. The king gave Mordecai authority to write a new decree. Mordecai, now dressed in royal robes of blue and white, with a great golden crown, stepped into the role Haman once held, but for righteous purposes. He drafted a counter-decree. The new law empowered the Jews in every province to assemble and defend themselves, destroy any armed force that might attack them, and even take the property of their enemies. This decree was hurriedly written in every script and language, from India to Ethiopia, and distributed by the swiftest Persian couriers. The Jews rejoiced. Where there had been dread, a tide of hope now surged. A fast was turned into a feast. Susa, once confused and sorrowful, erupted into celebration. Word of the new decree spread quickly. In many provinces, the enemies of the Jews grew hesitant. With the king's backing and Mordecai's growing influence, fear of the Jews fell upon the people. Thousands of Gentiles, out of reverence or fear, aligned themselves with the Jews, offering assistance, friendship, and even converting. For the first time in exile, the Jews were no longer merely tolerated, they were empowered. Meanwhile, Jewish communities across the empire began strategizing defense, organizing their people, storing supplies, and praying. In synagogues hidden within Persian cities, scrolls were read aloud, reminding the people of God's past deliverances, of Egypt, Jericho, and David's victories. They believed this was not just a political reversal, it was divine intervention. The 13th day of Adar arrived. In every province, the enemies of the Jews, those who had prepared to plunder, kill, and wipe out the chosen people, now faced a defiant, prepared, and divinely supported resistance. What was meant to be a day of massacre became a day of justice. In Susa, 500 of the most prominent enemies were slain. Throughout the empire, tens of thousands who had allied with Haman's hatred were overthrown. This was not a bloodthirsty war, but an act of righteous self-defense. The Jews did not plunder their enemies, though they were permitted to. After the intense battle in the capital, Esther made a bold request that the Jews of Susa be granted one more day to complete their defense. The king agreed. On the 14th of Adar, the Jews in Susa rose again and struck down 300 more who threatened them. Haman's 10 sons, symbols of generational hatred and bloodline vengeance, were publicly hanged on the very gallows their father had prepared for Mordecai. This act was more than retribution. It was the breaking of a spiritual cycle. Meanwhile, in other cities, Jews rested on the 14th, but in Susa, their day of rest and joy came on the 15th of Adar. The days that followed were marked by great rejoicing. Homes were filled with feasting and laughter. Families that had once fasted in fear now danced in freedom. Songs of deliverance echoed through alleyways and hilltops. Children, once hidden in fear, played in the streets. There was no mistaking it. This was a miraculous turnaround. Mordecai recorded everything and sent letters to all Jews, instructing them to observe the 14th and 15th of Adar annually as a festival. This was to be known as Purim, named after the lot that Haman had cast to determine their destruction. But God, in sovereign irony, reversed the outcome. What was intended for death became a date of deliverance. Mordecai emphasized that this festival was not optional. It was a commanded remembrance. Gifts were to be exchanged, food given to the poor, and joy celebrated across generations. Queen Esther and Mordecai wrote together, adding their royal authority to the observance of Purim. Their letter became part of Persian law and Jewish tradition. Mordecai continued to rise in power and prominence. He became second only to King Xerxes, overseeing justice, law, and diplomacy throughout the empire. But unlike Haman, he did not use power for personal gain. He was known for seeking the good of his people and speaking peace to all the provinces. Strikingly, the book of Esther never mentions the name of God. Not once. And yet, his fingerprints are everywhere. In the sleepless night of the king, the precise timing of Esther's courage, the reversal of edicts, and the downfall of Haman. God may be hidden, but he is never absent. Esther teaches us that even in silence, God is orchestrating salvation. The Jews, though still in exile, had become firmly established. They were no longer a scattered, fearful minority, but a respected and united community. Esther continued to intercede for her people. Mordecai chronicled the events, and both their names were etched into history. She wasn't just a queen, she became a savior, a symbol of courage. Esther began her journey as a hidden exile. She rose not by ambition, but by obedience, fasting, and faith. She walked into danger, not because she wanted power, but because she realized why she had it. She reminds us all, you are where you are for a purpose. Your silence may be costly. Your courage, no matter how trembling, can echo through eternity. Life lessons from Esther. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. Esther was afraid, but she acted. God places people in strategic positions. You may not see it now, but you are where you are for such a time as this. Fasting and prayer can shift destinies. Before acting, Esther sought God. Justice is inevitable. Though delayed, Haman's plot was reversed on his own head. Your true identity has divine power. Esther hid hers at first, but when she embraced it, salvation followed. Dear listener, maybe you feel hidden. Maybe you're uncertain of your worth. Maybe the world has made you silent. But Esther's story was not just written for history. It was written for you. You don't need to wear a crown to be a queen. You don't need a throne to move heaven. You don't need perfection, only obedience. Perhaps you were born into your family, in your city, in this generation, not by accident, but for such a time as this. Will you rise like Esther? Will you fast, pray, and step forward when it's easier to shrink back? Will you use your voice when silence is comfortable? Will you be brave when everything in you wants to hide? Because somewhere in your life, someone's deliverance may depend on your yes. If this story stirred something deep inside you, don't scroll away just yet. This may be your Esther moment. Tell us in the comments, I was born for such a time as this. Or share how this story speaks to your own calling. Smash the like button if this story inspired you to live with courage. Tap subscribe so you never miss another powerful Bible story from Joint Heirs Bible Stories. Share this with someone who feels unseen. They might just be the next Esther. Your story is still unfolding. And the author, he's never stopped writing.